These mixing engineers have worked with some of the biggest artists in the world. Most people will hear the end master and wonder, what makes it sound so special? What makes these mixes sound so great? Having mastered for these mixing engineers, I'm going to share 3 key things I've learned from their mixing style and what sets them apart. Buckle up, smash the subscribe button, like the video, because you'll actually end up leaving with some things to think about when it comes to mixing your next record. First engineer is Bob Horn, and that's because he takes mixes all the way. Now I'll explain what that means in a second, but I mastered several projects which Bob has mixed. Every time the mixes come in, they sound like, the common thread is that they're a finished record. They sound great. What he needs mastering for is that third perspective, that fresh set of ears to make sure nothing slips through the cracks. And the reason why that's so refreshing, and I think we should observe that here right now in this video, is too often mixing engineers lean on mastering to fill out the gaps that they couldn't achieve in mixing. So what they'll do is they boost a snare a couple of dB, hoping the mastering will be able to squash it back down into the mix, or hoping things gel together after mastering, even to the point where I've had artists and producers mention that the mixing engineer said that mastering will fix the levels of a certain element or a certain effect. Now I'm going to show you one of Bob's mixes and you'll understand exactly what I mean. This is as the mix comes in for mastering, it's spot on. So this track is Don't Understand by Young DRA featuring NLE Chopper. All right, take a listen.
He got killed, nigga, get some get back. Tell us spit back. They don't understand it.
Don't tell my language, they don't understand. Don't know my pain, so you don't understand. I'm paranoid and they don't understand. I tell my shit, so they don't understand. Don't tell my language, they don't understand. Don't know my pain, so you don't understand. I'm paranoid and they don't understand.
Now, when a mix comes in this tight, this to the point, this almost sounding like a finished record, I'm constantly level matching and 1 second looping the snare hits, the kick hits, particular bass notes and vocal phrases, because as I'm looking to quality control and embellish what's there, it's important to make sure that the processing I'm applying is not taking a step back from any of the elements or any of the mix decisions he's made, because he's confident in his mixing. The mixes come in, they sound great. Every element sits where it should be, and any slight change, a decibel up here too far, it can make a mix collapse very quickly. So that's the mastering side of things. If you're the mixing engineer and you're trying to learn something from this process, it's that your client needs to sign off on a completed mix, all right? You should be aiming to mix to the 9th degree where the client is happy and that there's no guesswork going into mastering. You're confident in your sound, you're happy with the mix bus processing you've got on, you're not listening to YouTubers telling you to take off your mix bus processing or the limiter, you're keeping it sounding gelled as it should be because that's what the client signed off on and that's what the sound you're confident in, and that's something really important to learn from, or at least I've learned from Bob Horn's mixing style. The next engineer who we have to take a lesson from is Irko. Now, he's a multi-platinum engineer who recently mixed Kanye's Donda album, and he's an absolute bass fan. He loves bass. My first ever international mastering job back in 2015, that was my first foray into doing a project for somebody outside of Australia. He was the mixing engineer. He was mixing a signal for some producers here in Melbourne, collabing with a Canadian artist, and when the mix came in, the low end was on another level. I hadn't heard a mix with low end like this before, and it hits. When you hear this drop, I'll play you the drop, and it's wild, all right? It's wild, and I'll explain why it's wild. I love the low end in this track, and you can tell that rather than trying to carve up every little frequency to make everything fit, Irko's mixes sound like the low end is its own cohesive element. So when you're mixing, or at least what I've learned for this from when I'm mixing, rather than trying to consider how I can make that kick drum punchier, or that bass line fatter, or sidechain everything for better separation, I start my mixes now with this mix in mind, considering how the low end can be its own cohesive and musical element. It's all about feel, not necessarily carving and dialing everything exactly precise to the 10th of a decibel. The thing with feel is that it comes with time and experience, and that time and experience can't be replaced by opening up your door and finding a cool new technique. Developing your feel and musical sensibilities comes from the time you spend listening to music outside the studio, enjoying new music and building up your repertoire. So something I do, and I invite everybody to do, and you should be doing this if you're in the music industry anyway, is create a playlist of new music that you haven't heard. You know, go down the top 50 releases, find things that are really wowing you and add them to your playlist. Listen to them in the gym, in the car, when you're doing admin in the morning and emails. That's literally how I'm developing my sonic sensibilities, to get an idea of what feels right. That's what you can do moving forward. The next engineer is Travis Ferrens, who leaves no stone unturned. He's another Platinum Award-winning engineer who I've mastered mixes for, and he's mixed songs for artists like Lo Fang and Skylar Grey. Of the projects we've worked on together, Travis leaves no stone unturned, and this is actually really incredible because I sometimes even see the email chains. Every possible vocal edit, every revision note, every little detail a client could request of him, he does. And he hits every note his clients request of him without compromise. And this is really important because a lot of mixing engineers see everything as transactional. Okay, the client wants another revision, the client wants to update this, a vocal up here or guitar down here, they don't know what they're doing. Travis doesn't take that road. All right, now, and he sums it up perfectly right here. Watch this TikTok he did.
So I got a question about mix revisions, and I personally do not cap mix revisions. I believe that the job isn't done until the artist is 100% happy, and so I will do unlimited revisions. Now, that being said, I'm doing like 2 or 3 revisions before a mix is approved, so it's not that big of a deal for me to offer that. Obviously, when I started out, there was way more revisions, but I think that's part of the learning process because you're learning how to translate what somebody wants, understand what works in different genres, and I think it's still even important to offer unlimited mix revisions even early in your career. So when it does come to people that do cap mix revisions, I think it comes from one of 2 places. Either A, they want to get paid sooner because the mix is done, or B, they're uncomfortable with the hourly rate that they end up with at the end of a project because it took too long. And I think that there's easy solutions to both of those. What I do to remedy the first one is I take half payment up front, and then the second half payment is due 2 weeks after I send you the first mix, whether we're done or not. And generally we are done. Now, as for B, I think that what's happening there is you are not valuing your time correctly. I think that it's important to make sure that you're being paid enough for a project to be willing to go the extra mile and put all of the hours in and make sure that everybody's happy. Now, obviously, early in your career, having stipulations like that can be challenging, but eventually you'll get there. Just keep putting the work in, do great work, and people will respect your business practices.
From that, I've learned that it's more important to value the results rather than the process of how many revisions there are or hourly rate or whatnot. Getting the final mix to a point where the clients are wowed is the service you're providing them. It's not necessarily, I'm going to mix it. If they're not wowed, bad luck. It is getting it to the end where they go, wow, this sounds amazing. And limiting or penalizing that process is a way to put unnecessary stress on the creative process and limit your potential if you're the mixer yourself and reputation too. So that was so Travis is really commendable for that in terms of teaching me something which and putting it in perspective, which I think can be muchly appreciated. So there you have it. 3 key things that I've learned from some of the best mixing engineers out there. If you want to learn more about what I've learned from the world's best mastering engineers, then check out my other video where I lay out 8 things that will help you take your music to the next level.